Please sit down and be quiet for just a minute.
Commissioner Presley, you there?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Bailey?
Present.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, and I appreciate y'all joining us today. We're going to get started straight in with the telecommunications agenda. Number one, discussion and possible action regarding the proposed order in docket number 2021 UA 165, CenturyLink Communications LLC, approval of transfer of control. Ms. Denmark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This petition was filed on October 12th, 2021 by Lumen Technologies on behalf of CenturyTel of Adamsville and CenturyTel of North Mississippi. The proposed transaction will transfer all ILEC subsidiaries to Connect Holding LLC. All subsidiaries will continue to provide their telecommunications services to customers in Mississippi without interruption and will not result in changes to rates, terms, or conditions of service. The proposed transaction is slated to occur by July 2022, subject to approval by all the regulatory authorities. It was filed with the FCC under WC Docket 21-350, and a public notice was published on December 16th, 2021. Staff has reviewed the petition and spoken with counsel for the companies. This transaction meets all the statutory requirements for approval in the state of Mississippi, and staff recommends approval contingent upon FCC approval.
Okay, are there any questions?
I move we approve. Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, number two is discussion and possible action regarding the proposed order in docket number 2021 UA 186, GC Pivotal LLC, approval transfer of control. Ms. Denmark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On November 19th, 2021, GC Pivotal filed a petition for approval of a transfer of control associated with the Chapter 11 bankruptcy petition. GC Pivotal is authorized in Mississippi to provide local exchange and inter-exchange telecommunications services and also holds authority from the FCC to provide interstate and international telecommunications services. The plan of reorganization was filed with the U.S. Bankruptcy Court on October 31st, 2021. No assignment of licenses, assets, or customers will occur as a result of the reorganization. The petition was also filed with the FCC under docket WC 21-445, and a public notice was published on December 15th, 2021. Staff has reviewed the petition, spoken with counsel, and the petition and the transaction meet all statutory requirements for approval in the state of Mississippi, so staff recommends approval contingent upon FCC approval.
Okay, is there any questions?
I move we approve. Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. All right, we're going to move on to the administrative agenda. There's no items on the energy or water or sewer agenda, so we'll go with number one, discussion and possible action regarding the proposed order in docket number 2019 AD 24, presentation of auditor's finding and certification of Entergy Mississippi fuel audit report to the legislature in accordance with Mississippi Code annotated section 77342. Ms. Dixon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item, as well as item number two, both involve the Commission's consideration of two orders certifying the annual financial and management fuel audits of Mississippi Power Company and Entergy to the legislature in accordance with the specified statute. The reports were filed by the auditors in December and have been reviewed by the staff. Staff submitted their required comments and summaries concerning the reports yesterday, and our representatives are available to address those today if the Commission has any questions. In addition, we have representatives from each of the auditing firms here today to present the Commission with a brief summary of their respective findings and recommendations. Specifically, we have representatives from Carr, Riggs & Ingram and London Economics here to present findings concerning Mississippi Power, and representatives of Horn and Liberty Consulting Group here to present their findings concerning Entergy. Since the Entergy fuel audits are number one on the agenda, we would start with Mr. Joe Green, who is a representative of Horn, who of course did the financial audit for Entergy.
Thanks, Commissioners. My name is Joe Green. I'm a partner with Horn LLP here in our Ridgeland office. I'm here today to present the report on the fuel adjustment audit for the period of October 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2021. If I could just give a brief overview of the audit process itself, and then I'll go into our report and related findings. The audit process for this engagement will typically begin in August, where Horn will complete its risk assessment and planning procedures. Out of that, we will confirm our understanding of the policies and procedures that will drive our audit processes and also the samples that we will select. We will also establish materiality in accordance with auditing standards established in the United States. The next step is execution of field work, which again, field work means something different these days because most of the work we do is performed remotely with COVID, but we obtain the company's books and records, and we select samples, we test those transactions. Actually, for this audit, we will test transactions for the first 9 months of the period, which allows us some efficiency in working through the large sample size that we do pick. We will complete those procedures and then we will wrap up the last 3 months of the year. Once those samples are finished testing, we will develop a draft report. We will review that report with management. We submit that to the commission for review as well, and then we issue our report. Again, that is a high-level summary of the process that begins somewhere around August and finishes in December. The report we issued is an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. In our packet that we submitted, we did notice, report what we call a question cost. During the audit procedures, we identified costs totaling $95,964 related to the demolition of the Rex Brown plant. Those costs were included based on management's interpretations of the rules as defined. Under the Mississippi Code annotated, it was not clear to us that those were allowable costs. We concluded that based on the dollars that we would identify those as question costs in our report, we performed additional procedures around these type costs just to verify there were no additional costs included in the allowable schedule, and those costs were limited to the dollars that I just specified. We are unaware of any other uncorrected misstatements other than those that have been identified by Mississippi Public Utilities staff in the past related to fuel handling costs. Those were included in our report of $90,863. Outside of that, we encountered no disagreements with Energy Mississippi management over the application of significant accounting principles and the basis of their judgments on significant matters. And we are not aware of any other consultations that they had during this engagement with other accountants on auditing matters related to the engagement at hand. Again, we issued a clean opinion on these financial statements.
Unless the commission has any questions, we can move to Mr. Antinook.
Thank you.
Next, we have John Antinook from Liberty Consulting Group.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm first obliged to say that it's great to have the chance to be in person among old friends again and have a chance to make new ones. I hope that Lord willing, we can continue to operate that way. As always, we appreciate the confidence the Commission has placed in us to perform these important fuel and energy management engagements. And today I'd like to talk about our review of activities at EML for the 12 months that ended in September 2021. In examining organization, staffing, and controls, we continue to find, as we have always before, that the use of central groups to manage fuel and energy has provided stable organizations that clearly and appropriately assign responsibilities and employ required expertise in a way that's economically efficient. We did note that with EML's large fuel and energy power costs, regular operational and financial auditing of them by the company is important. We recommended that internal auditing routinely include these areas, specifically considering EML in its risk assessments that drive annual internal audit plans, recognizing, of course, that internal auditing has to make independent judgments about what to audit. Turning more specifically now to natural gas, it's the primary source of fuel for the company's generating stations. Our prior uncertainties about natural gas buyer workload have now been addressed, and that's come through automation enhancements and organizational realignments. Purchase and sale record keeping has also much improved, now needing only narrow tweaking, which our report recommended. Natural gas delivery to these stations depends on reasonably assured pipeline capacity, and that's concentrated here in one provider. However, we did examine management's examination of factors involved in assuring adequate transportation access, and we found them appropriate. Recently, in addition, adding a new receipt point for gas on the system improves attractiveness to Northeast U.S. suppliers, my long-ago home grounds, an important source of supply after fracking expansion in that part of the country. With respect to natural gas supply, management continues to employ solicitations that attract a large number of suppliers in competition with each other. Management grew its already robust group of eligible participants this year, and its continued use of the agreements that it employs with a large number of suppliers calling for supplies as needed remain well suited to the MISO operating environment. Amounts provided by top suppliers decreased and the rankings among them changed, both of which we found as evidence of meaningful competition by suppliers for the right to supply. Turning now to planning, dispatch, and MISO, our review of management and operation of dispatch disclosed no concerns. Management has now addressed our past recommendation calling for a backcasting program, indicating it will continue to monitor forecasting performance and reporting activities on a going forward basis. We also found that the Atala, Choctaw, and Hines combined cycle plants proved among the most effective and efficient MISO cost performers, producing significant economy for customers. Independents, on the other hand, produced but small reductions in cost to customers on a fuel and energy basis, and that means excluding the fixed and operating capital costs it takes to operate the plant. That result actually would have reversed to a negative contribution absent the extreme cold and high natural gas prices that applied during the audit period, and I'm sure you all remember the February 2021 spike with great unpleasantness. Average MISO prices ran about 50% higher than those of the prior audit period. Looking ahead, significant uncertainty surrounds the ability of independents to make even small contributions should gas prices moderate, or should, as I will discuss in a minute, last year's spike in Powder River Basin coal prices translate into structural higher coal prices. Continuing on matters involving independents, we found that the process for committing the unit to MISO operation frequently produced economic losses, meaning added costs for customers. More significant, however, were unit outages and the derating of Unit 2. Those outages cost a lost opportunity for contributing margins that reduce customer costs. For example, an extended early 2021 Unit 1 outage, which included the February 21 spike, lost an opportunity to produce an estimated $4 million in reduced customer costs. Each year, we compare independents' delivered prices of coal with those of a comparison group. Independents slipped this year, but not because of purchasing or management activities. Virtually all independents' coal came under contracts that were in place before the audit period started. Management decided to forego in 2020 the annual fall solicitation that has more recently covered essentially all needs, and that would have, had they executed it, provided for supply in 2021 during our audit period. Management dropped that solicitation appropriately, in our view, when planning activity showed more than sufficient committed deliveries to last through 2021. The independents' slip in coal cost competitiveness actually resulted primarily from changes in rail costs. First came an increase in the surcharge based on changes in highway diesel fuel pricing. More significant was the loss of a factor that supported coal cost competitiveness in the face of sustained low natural gas prices that had applied before 2021. That discount came in the form of discounted rail transportation prices, which had the effect of making coal more competitive in competition against gas. That discount, worth some $10 million annualized, first diminished, and then it actually disappeared entirely as gas prices increased through 2021. Nevertheless, despite these two changes that had negative consequences, our review of the rail contract did find it competitive in the market. However, for the first time in our work here, we observed that delivered prices for Independence and White Bluff Coal, the two Arkansas plants operated by Entergy, began to diverge. Coal for both units is bought and transported through predominantly common sources and contracts. We sought to determine why Independence prices went from parity in the year before and virtual parity the year before that to 4% higher. Management did not provide the information that we asked for to make a determination of the reason for that change. The Powder River Basin market that provides Independence supply has recently changed markedly. High natural gas prices have made coal more competitive, increasing demand for it from a weak market, a market that's faced declining supplies and a tenuous future now for many years. Demand for coal spiked late in the audit period as increasing gas prices made coal stations much more competitive in MISO markets. By September, suppliers from the regions reported approaching exhaustion of the incremental supplies they could put into the market on a short-term basis, and prices naturally rose. They did so at a much accelerated fourth quarter pace after our audit period ended, producing by the end of 2021 more than a doubling of spot prices. In the face of these circumstances, we did find management continually and sufficiently engaged in analyzing the market and determining how to deal with it. The first reaction was the cancellation of the 2020 solicitation, which I mentioned, and the second was going to market at the end of our period in response to threatened undersupply as burns at Independence increased in a very much tightening market. We have consistently been recommending more flexibility and analytical support be added to the supply planning and contracting process for coal. We continue to do so today. Past recommendations came under a pattern that had exhibited continuing oversupply. The recent reversal from too much to too little doesn't undercut that recommendation, but in fact reinforces the continuing need for the changes we recommended. In fact, lessons we are learning even today as we follow the news about the interdependence of U.S. and global energy markets further underscores the need for a changed approach. Management did succeed in bringing monthly measures of inventory down to near target levels as the audit period closed. They were at critically high levels when we doing our last audit. Going forward, however, it's important to keep tools like the aggressive use of contract volume flexibility and special dispatch pricing from becoming common practice. Moreover, management should not assume continuation of increased burns resulting from gas prices remaining high by comparison with whatever shakes out of what's now a very uncertain future for Powder River Basin coal pricing. Despite the reductions in inventory levels, which were substantial and appropriate, oversupply did, however, continue to have customer consequence in the early part of this audit period, as it did in the second half of the last audit period. Management began in mid-2020 to address oversupply that was critically stressing its inventory capacity. It did so by paying suppliers to defer deliveries and by using Independence MISO pricing that was non-traditional. Both created costs for customers, but they did succeed, however, in lessening the negative impacts that were brought on by the oversupply situation. Turning now to management and administering contracts, doing so is at least as complex as buying the coal. Management performed those activities well. It reduced the rail fleet it used to transport coal, and it plans to continue to optimize fleet size for matching coal delivery requirements with the fleet that's available to do it. We also found effective management of receipt and storage and appropriate measurement and monitoring of quantities and quality and attention to making sure that pricing provisions in the contract related to the quality of fuel were appropriately applied. Sound methods, tools, and support came in administration of contracts. We observed a number of operating issues at Independence as well. O&M cost performance declined in this audit period, driven largely by the outages to which I made reference. Independence experienced major forced outages and a unit rate caused by equipment issues, the nature of which the company deems confidential. Contractors performed significant maintenance and outage work at Independence and the other stations. Circumstances this period show the need for a review of contractor work quality and of owner management of that activity. Circumstances at the gas plant also tended to confirm this need. The large number of lower priority maintenance items at Independence also cause for attention, which management has been applying, but we continue to find a significant number of lower priority maintenance items. Moreover, and I think this is the most critical observation about Independence, as the station proceeds through its last life stage, management will need to address the inevitable increases in difficulty it will face in retaining and recruiting resources, and in making decisions about where to spend money to keep the unit operating effectively. We have noted resource constraints as a factor in maintenance completion backlogs before, and this audit brought the departure of a key employee that led to the outsourcing of key work at the plant, which underscore that the resource issue, while an emergent one, is one that's going to continue to be important to address. Following audits like those we have performed should continue to monitor Independence resource sufficiency as the plant approaches its end of life. Turning now to plant operations more generally, management continued to focus appropriately on fleet priorities and had established clear and performance-oriented goals that we found appropriate. Maintenance backlogs at the gas plants remain at a reasonable level, and management has addressed our prior recommendation by implementing a comprehensive heat rate guide at the generating units. That's designed to prevent the use of fuel basically that goes to waste rather than to energy production. We reviewed cost and performance metrics for the fleet that serves Entergy Mississippi. We continue to find merit in management's addressing of less than average non-fuel O&M cost performance at 2 of its units. They've experienced comparatively weaker forced outage rates and outage duration performance. On the other hand, operations metrics at a number of the other gas units, which, as I noted, now provide the backbone of the fleet serving EML, have either remained stable or in fact improved. Ending now with Grand Gulf, fuel costs remained in line with those of the previous audit period. In addition, a $40.5 million credit to fuel expense and O&M accounts came from the U.S. Department of Energy as compensation for, and I'm going to quote here because we didn't look into the details of this, interim spent fuel damages from 2012 to 2017, which relates to DOE's engagement in an effort to find ways to provide for off-site storage of spent fuel. Management entered into a variety of new contracts covering the elements of the fuel cycle in the audit period. We found the planning and the market analysis leading to the changed approach under which it structured that portfolio of contracts appropriate. The new agreements, however, will not come into effect until well after the end of the coming audit period, making a detailed review of them a matter for subsequent audits. Finally, we have routinely measured Grand Gulf's capacity factor against the standard of 90%. During this audit period, management discontinued tracking station capacity factor and turning to the use of a related but not necessarily identical capability factor. We created a combined factor using the months for which they still track capacity factor with the last 4 months of the year during which they used the new factor. Grand Gulf achieved an 85.1% result under this combined measure. The gap between that number and 90% produced about $2.8 million in replacement costs for the 12-month audit period, using the average MISO day-ahead prices for each month. Using a yearly average would have produced about $6.7 million in replacement costs, reflecting the fact that there were some extraordinarily high-cost months during this audit period, particularly earlier in the year, that made the availability of the unit in those months particularly valuable for customers. I want to close simply by commending, once again, the support of your staff for our work. We thank them for that support as ever.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question. Mr. Antonucci, would you go back over this swap to a capability factor rather than the established standard? Because it's obvious why one would do that to make it look better than what it really is. And so could you kind of walk back through just a minute those metrics for us. I just want to make sure we get that clearly on the record because we've obviously had a ton of problems at Grand Gulf. I don't know anybody that's satisfied with how that's running. So could you walk us through that?
Yeah, both measures are used. I don't know that there's a magic to one versus the other. Obviously, consistency in use of them makes sense. You don't want to change the standard from year to year because weaker performance might be concealed by that. And I don't know why the company made the change. I don't know that it's material. We actually reported for the months during which they tracked both factors in the report what the difference is. We were going to try to do I guess it would have been an 8-month comparison of capacity factor, but that just doesn't, it's not meaningful to do that. Trying to do it for 8 months doesn't really help much. So I don't know that the issue lies in so much in changing for convenience as it does in just making sure that whatever's done is done consistently. It's certainly still possible to measure both.
I mean, you're aware, though, of the actions that Arkansas and Louisiana have taken at FERC related to the performance of Grand Gulf. I'm just trying to understand why we go from measuring one way to another, and that's a company-imposed change on that.
Yeah, and again, I think not to attribute motives, but in a sense, I agree with you that if there is a...
Well, I'll be glad to attribute to motive. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't mind to do that.
Yeah.
But
I don't want to do that because we didn't really look at what the difference would have been if we tried to do it a different way. We simply observed that consistency has the benefit of
well, I
allowing
mean,
you to track the
consistency
same
has
way
a benefit
year over year.
when you're in the middle of multi-state litigation about a plant in which we're trying to measure the capability of the plant, and in the middle of the litigation, in the middle of the arguments about it, we change the standard by which we measure the ability of the plant. I mean, it doesn't take a PhD from Mississippi State to figure that out. I mean, there's a change in the standard. You just reported that. It's in your report, right?
Yes.
And there has to be a reasoning behind why to do this. It's funny to me we didn't have this change until we started having these different pieces of litigation come out that are central to the heart of the performance of this plant. And I'm not at all criticizing. I appreciate you for bringing this out. I just think it's pretty enlightening to see.
We haven't
And nobody,
we haven't looked at the litigation and how this measure would affect the litigation, but I've been around the bases for more than 30
Same
years
here.
now. I've seen litigation have an effect on how things get measured. Whether that's true here or not, I'm going to leave to people who know a lot more about it.
well, in the political world, we got something we call a spin doctor. And there's ways to spin things. And we don't know if you're changing the measurable, the standard of measuring, whatever that may be. That helps to beef up the idea that somehow that this plant is doing better than we are. I don't know anybody from this side of this bar that's not concerned about the performance of Grand Gulf. I mean, it ought to be a very big concern for us all the way. And how we measure that has got to be key to whether or not we're measuring apples to apples. And I think what you're telling me in a net is that changing that could be the difference between an apples to apples comparison, and it could be apples to oranges.
From year to year. In either event,
Correct.
they missed the standard, the 90% standard.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. They missed it anyway.
Right.
Change your standards and you still miss it. But
Right.
I get that.
I will say, if you look at our past reports, we have expressed, I think, some important views on the long-term economics of the unit based on performance and based on the market. So I think it is correct for everybody, company, share stakeholders and commission alike, to look very closely at what that unit is going to be capable of doing.
Let's talk a minute generally. You made a comment, and I wrote this down, about review of contractor work product and the mistakes that you found and the problems. Could you talk to us just a little bit more about that in a general term?
No, the company declared that as outside our scope. We were not.
Say that again for the record.
The
When
company,
you asked
we
about
sought-
performance of contractor work, they did what?
we sought to determine the reasons and the root causes for the outages.
Mhm.
It was determined that is not appropriate for review in audits like
Okay.
what we do, but that other methods exist for undertaking.
We've got another method we can employ from this bench if they don't want to participate and work with you on that. And I wanted to get that point on the record. So,
And I think that's fair, not to criticize the company. I mean, I think the point is their belief is there
Well,
are other ways of addressing it.
let me give you a little history lesson. We're here today doing these audits through your type of, through the engagement with Liberty and the various other consultants, because when I came here in 2008, we had a 28% rate increase going into effect, and immediately in a lawsuit by the Attorney General, which led to an opening of an antitrust investigation by the Department of Justice, which led to us going into a regional transmission organization, which led us to spending the millions of dollars a year that we're spending through an AG's opinion to buttress what at that time was being done by the public utility staff, previous staff direction. But the commission changed that procedure. And to tell us and the people we're employing, because we're here as a result, you're here today, John, as a result of action by the Department of Justice on an antitrust violation and a lawsuit by the Attorney General of this state to get this mess cleaned up. And the company knows that. The company they know it better than anybody that knows it. And the fact that we would be refused, or you would be refused as our agent, information related to the performance of contractors is ludicrous. And so I intend, if we can do it today, I'll be glad to give my colleagues time. We'll find out and can engage you in a way to find that out. If they're going to refuse your questions, then we need to refuse to accept those reports. We can go to refusing too. And so I don't think I mean, those, to me, from what I saw and what you said today, central to the problems of keeping these plants running, of which we're all concerned about. You know, we're all concerned about whether or not they can even perform correctly, is the review of the contractor work and the work product. It's whether or not you go out and hire Keystone cops to come fix a power plant. It's pretty simple. Or are you hiring experienced people who have a performance to do it? That is central to what you have done. That is central in my mind as to what your charge in evaluating the management is. Management, I mean, it's to see whether or not you're making right decisions that a sane person with good motives would make in that situation. And so I appreciate you getting it on the record for us today that they refuse to give you that information, that they refuse to participate in that, because we have other regulatory tools to make sure that that refusal doesn't stand. And shame on Entergy. Let me say this, shame on you for things that are central to what cost ratepayers money to say it's outside the scope. You could find a way to get that information. You find a way to do a lot of other things. You can find a way to get that information if you wanted to. Thank you, Mr. Antonote.
If I could, obviously, there may or may not be good reasons behind the outages. There may be superior performance behind them. We don't know.
You don't know because they won't tell you.
We do think it is a legitimate area of inquiry, and I do agree that this audit is not necessarily the only place to do it. Getting it done somewhere,
But this
as you're pointing
wasn't-
out, has value.
I get that, but that's not the question. The question is whether or not it's capable, if it's a valid point to be made in this audit. And there's nothing in the law, there's nothing in the AG's opinion, and particularly I would ask anybody that's interested in this to go back and read an opinion I requested from the Attorney General in July of 2008 that lined out the exact process we're in, and it bifurcated the process between a mere accounting and a management review. It broke it out into two different spots, one of which is what Horn performed, the other was for what you're performing, to look at the prudency of those actions. And if we found out that you just hired somebody off the street that yesterday went into the power plant business repair and we couldn't get plants repaired, to me, common sense says that's a prudency determination as to whether or not you had enough sense as a company to hire an experienced contractor versus somebody that just graduated and got their license. That's at the heart of the management of whether or not they prudently incurred these costs and whether or not they're doing the right thing. And I understand and I appreciate the position that you've been in. You're simply there as our agent getting the door slammed in your face by a multi-billion-dollar utility that could answer these questions if they wanted to. That's all I'm saying. And so we're going to get the answers to your questions. The company's extremely, I hope, if they're not, they ought to be, extremely aware that each commissioner has individual subpoena power. Individual, so we don't have to vote on it. We can issue the subpoena ourselves to get the answers to these questions. And shame on whoever at Entergy refused to give us those answers.
I want to go first. Actually, you read it.
Commissioner,
you have a question? So just real quick, I mean, those are certainly the issue just brought up, it was certainly one I flagged as well this morning in reviewing that. Because I know it's not just the Institute of Nuclear Power that tracks this stuff. There's DOE, the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and other folks that has this. So I would love to see, multiple reporting platforms by which performance data is captured and relayed to the general public, particularly in a way that's been done for multiple years, that's understandable and comparable across other platforms and other industry sectors and that kind of stuff. So I think we're on the right track on that. But I did want to kind of get back to the point I think you were going there. This isn't the last step in this process. This provides additional opportunity based on the recommendations and findings, the staff review, and we still get a bite at this apple as well as far as digging into other recommendations. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, and I also wanted to provide a little bit of insight into the process because this is an issue that came up over the course of the audit, and I don't want there to be a misunderstanding from Mr. Antoniuk's perspective or from the company's. The issue regarding scope was addressed, and I was involved with those discussions. And when we looked at the statute, absolutely management matters are involved in this particular statute with respect to fuel procurement. And so when the company raised a question about scope, it was stated, like, we came to the conclusion that this is absolutely something that the commission can go into. However, for the purposes of what we've contracted for and outlined in the contract with the auditors and what was, refers to the statute itself, it didn't relate directly to the matter of fuel procurement, and therefore the issue should be flagged. But if the commission chose to pursue it further, then we have the opportunity to do so through the separately defined management audit statute.
Well, I get
So
that.
I wanted to be clear so that there was no misunderstanding on either part of the process.
I understand that, but I still think it's cheap on their part not to participate in it, and they could have come forward with information if they wanted to. They obviously didn't want to, and my question is, why do you not want to tell us? That's a simple question. Why do you want to tell us about this contractor issue? But the thing is, I get what you're saying, it's a statutory scope, but that doesn't prohibit that. It's funny to me, if these companies want something, they can find every which way in the world to get it to us. But when they don't want to tell you something, we can come up with a tiny little scope thing in which we can't say. And I just am not buying that argument. I understand what you're saying about the law, I get all of that. But if I were brought before this commission because of the United States Department of Justice antitrust investigation, and we led to all this, and it was something outside the scope, and I was splitting hairs about that, I would say, I realize that this is maybe outside the scope, but let me go ahead and satisfy the commission as to these questions. That's what you call a good faith effort. Stonewalling, slamming doors, and using every little legal excuse in the world not to give information we need is unacceptable to me. So if we can get it one way, we can get it voluntarily, or we can get it by the way of subpoena. It's really simple. It's a very simple way that the company can either comply, one way or the other. They can come voluntarily, or they can get served by the sheriff, whichever one they want to do.
Just before you leave, real quick, I know you had some references to natural gas and what's going on with that. And I just kind of remind, everyone here and even folks listening that these audits, these reviews go through September 30th, 2021. And looking at the work to there. And we know since then we have certainly seen increased volatility of natural gas and other fuels due to, whether it's international supply demand or whatever the drivers are for that. Given sort of that, are you allowed to give a little more forward-looking analysis or recommendations, or is your review just constricted to within the previous 12 months because of, what we've seen with fuel price adjustments here at the commission just in the last couple of months and how that potentially relates?
I think that's a great question about the process. The process has to be carried out in a very, very short time frame. The audit period ends September 30. It understandably takes the company a fair amount of time following September 30 to rack up all the numbers. Particularly if you look at our compatriots on the accounting side, the kind of data that is produced by these operations is massive. So it takes, and I'm not complaining, I understand it, it takes, maybe 30, sometimes a little longer. So we're into October, November, and we have to get a draft report out. So there's kind of a crush to And these are requirements I think the legislature has given you the opportunity to deal with, so I'm not complaining about those either. So there's not a lot of time to pull together the analysis of the historical 12 months. We do look at planning, and we do try to look ahead. I think for example, if the discussion that we made about circumstances on coal contracting in 2021, we very much realize the circumstances are quite different now. And as a result of that, we looked at the recommendation we would have made just on the basis of the audit period relative to their planning for coal procurement and said, all right, now that we're in a whole different market, what does that mean? Does that mean our recommendation is reinforced, undercut, or altered? So we do that. On the nuclear side, they entered contracts that aren't going to go into effect until 2023. We did look at how they were looking at the market and how it was expected to change in the audit period and after the audit period, because the contracts they entered affect more than just the audit period. So to some extent, we do look ahead on a planning basis, not always with 100% comfort on the company side, but with enough. You know, they support what we're doing there pretty well. They get a little bit reluctant to talk too far ahead about the future because it's fuzzy, you know, and I think it's fuzziness more than hesitance or concealment that causes that. So we do try from a planning perspective to say how our current decisions properly respecting what is likely to come. I think if we look at what's happening, if we take the physical circumstances in Ukraine as a given, which we couldn't when we did the audit report, I think it becomes pretty clear what kind of impacts they're having on the market. So there, obviously, we didn't. You know, that happened, that's happened, and I'd like to be standing here talking to you about all that now. But, you know, after we filed the report,
I just want to kind of get that.
I've been doing a management audit in New Jersey, so my head's been down on fuel matters since then.
I just want to get that point out as folks review this and understanding the dates and parameters of which this audit was done, and that current circumstances may not be reflected in the report that we're reviewing and that we're sending across the street, just to remind folks that
I think that's a great.
that these continue to change.
Great
So during our fuel adjustment audit that we just did within the last couple of months, we asked the utilities, the electric folks, to come back every 90 days and to update us on where things are, their purchasing practices and what price looks like. And I tried to skim through. I don't know if you addressed timeliness as far as commission staff and utility staff review of that type of data, whether it should be annually, quarterly, or monthly, given, I know things have certainly changed since the last couple months, but.
We have not.
Okay.
We have not.
Okay, I just appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, is there any further questions? All right, does the utility staff, y'all have any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I move we accept the report as presented and transmitted to the legislature. And that would be for both items on the agenda.
Well, we haven't heard from the auditors for Mississippi Power Company
Oh,
yet.
all I'm talking about both of them, I was talking about on
Okay.
Entergy. Except both of the proposals related to Entergy, both of the recommended reports from both Horn and from Mr. Antonuc, and transmit them to the legislature. Is that proper? All right, that's my motion.
So real quick, what all goes across the street?
Well, we're just approving the Entergy report, and then we'll go take up Mississippi Power next.
Confidential versions of the reports, the redacted public versions of the reports, copies of the commission's orders, and copies of the staff's summaries will be transmitted to the legislature.
Yeah, all I'm moving on is to approve item one related to what's presented. And I know that the legislature is sitting over there with bated breath, just waiting to read these reports. Ain't none of them been read the whole time I've been here for 14 years. So I move we approve it and send that number one on the New York Times best-selling list report over.
I appreciate the clarification of what exactly all goes over. I just wasn't 100% sure, but second that motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Okay,
And
and
next is number 2, discussion and possible action regarding the proposed order in docket number 2019-8025, presentation of auditor's findings and certificate certification of Mississippi Power Company fuel audit reports to the legislature in accordance with Mississippi Code annotated section 77-342. Ms. Dixon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the same process with respect to Mississippi Power Company. First, we will have a report on the financial audit from Mr. Francois Hood, who is with Carr Riggs and Ingram.
Morning.
Morning.
My name is Francois Hood. I'm an audit partner with Carr Riggs and Ingram, CRI. And I would like to thank the MPSC for appointing us as auditor of the fuel audit for Mississippi Power.
Just real quick, I know we've had some folks at difficulty. I don't know if you can move that thing closer.
Closer?
or-
Excellent.
I'm just not.
I can speak louder too.
All right.
Usually every year, I essentially read you the same script. You know, going through our report, going through the letter to those in charge of governance, and truth to be told, if we have not encountered any problems during the audit and we follow our audit standards, I'm going to read you the same thing every year. So what I thought I'd do instead, I would just walk you through and point a couple things to your attention. First thing, first off, we issued an unqualified opinion, which means we have a clean audit opinion, clean audit report for Mississippi Power, and that's what we're looking for. That means that in our opinion, the schedule are presented in fairly normative respect in accordance with the Mississippi Code, FERC's ruling regulation, and the MPSC rules. Second, there's an emphasis of matter paragraph in our report, and this essentially only mentions that we did not perform some of the work which is performed by London Economics. We only focused on the financial portion of this audit. You'll notice that the format of the audit report is slightly different than in prior years, and that's because we implemented SAS 134 to 140, which is a new auditing standard, which essentially shuffled the order of the paragraphs in the audit report. It brought the audit opinion at the very top of our report, followed by management's responsibilities and the auditor's responsibility. But other than this, it had no impact on our scope and really did not impact the work that we performed for this audit. As far as the letter to those in charge of governance, we did not have any audit adjustments, either corrected or uncorrected. We have not uncovered any fraud, but let's keep in mind that, you know, the objective of our audit is not to uncover any fraud, but, you know, if we had uncovered any, it would be our responsibility to communicate them to you. And also, we had no disagreement with management, and we'll also confirm to you that we were independent of the company and the MPSC. One thing I wanted to point to, Ms. Dixon, is that we have 2 years extension available in our contract. That was year one, so we have 1 year available, and we're willing and available to continue to audit this should the MPSC decide to exercise the option. And that's all I have for you guys.
I got a question. So I was listening to your remarks. I guess something that's a little concerning to me. So I'd just like to understand, who do you feel that CRI is working for when they are performing these?
We're
these
for you guys.
Working for us.
Definitely.
What do you feel your job is?
Our job is to make sure that what Mississippi Power reports to you confirms to FERC, MTSC rule, and the Mississippi Code.
Well, you made two statements, and I noted them down. First thing you said, if as far as your procedures, your letter, so if it worked 1 year, we'll just continue using it the next year and the next year. And then secondly, you said, clean report, that's what we're looking for. So I just want to, I'm not commenting on anything, so I just think it's an unfair characterization to think that it sure is not my intent. We're looking for problems, we're looking for mistakes, we're looking for things that need to be corrected. My goal, and I don't think anybody up here's goal, is to go in and say, come hell or high water, we just want a clean report. So
Absolutely
I would
not,
make
no.
sure in the future, as you characterize these things, that you characterize it, that your job is to find out if there are problems and things that need to be cleaned up and things that need to be fixed and things that come to our attention. And your goal shouldn't be to just try to find a clean report at all points, or just to rinse and wash and reuse the same stuff over and over. I don't remember exactly. I just caught my attention. We can go back and play it on the tape later. But what you said about whatever work, we just send it back the next year. I don't know if that's just trying to get out of some work or what it is. What was that all about?
No, I was saying the presentation I make to you today.
Yeah,
Usually I walk
okay.
you through the report.
Yeah.
And the report is very standardized.
Yeah.
Other than the numbers change,
Yeah.
but the format of the report is standardized year over year. The format of the letter to those in charge of governance, as long as you follow the professional standards, that's a pretty standard report.
So do you
That's-
think it's your goal to get a clean report? What do you mean by that?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, our goal is to report to you what the result of our findings. What I'm telling you is that you have no concerns because this is a clean or a clean audit opinion. That's what I meant.
It's, okay. All right, thank you.
Welcome.
And next, we have Marie Fagan with London Economics, who performed the management procurement audit.
Good morning, Your Honor. I'm going to put this nice and low since I'm vertically challenged. So good morning, and London Economics is pleased to be here and pleased to be here in person again. And we also want to thank the folks at Mississippi Power and Southern Company for their help and cooperation. So given the audit period of October 2020 through September 2021, I want to share with you our findings and recommendations. And overall, we found that the processes, procedures, and oversight at MPC and Southern Company, Service Company, are thorough and professional, as befits a large and established organization. I'm going to share with you 7 highlights from our report and our findings, some of which have recommendations for improvements to processes that could, I'm doing something wrong with the sound, aren't
I
I?
think you just all up in the mic a lot. There you
Okay.
go.
Is that better?
Yeah, you good.
Okay. So seven points, some of which are recommendations for improving processes. So first of all, 1, organization and staffing. We found that MPC and Southern Company are well organized, good documentation of procedures and controls, and we don't have any specific recommendations at that high level. Point number 2 is plant operations. And here we found that although there are the generation group organization and staffing are adequate and procedures are well documented, we note that there were many more unplanned outage hours compared to the last audit, and that continues a trend of increasing annual unplanned outage hours that we've seen over the past few years. So we recommend that MPC conduct a thorough review of the root causes of the outage trends, and identify potential areas for improvement to reduce the frequency of unplanned outages. And in parallel, we found the availability of some of the plants, some of the units decreased during the audit period to the point where they didn't compare favorably to NERC industry averages. So we recommend a follow-up in the next audit period for MPC to monitor the performance at those units. Number 3 is coal procurement, and we found that the coal contracts for Plant Daniel seemed reasonable in terms of compliance with quality specifications, and that Southern Company Services procurement strategy allows flexibility, which is especially important because the plant operates as a peaking unit. Subbituminous coal procurement contract prices were competitive when we compared them to spot prices and forwards. So that we feel reflects market awareness and prudency, but bituminous coal contracts did not appear to be competitive. They were at higher prices than what we saw in the market. So we recommend that MPC and Southern Company Services benchmark bituminous coal costs against industry averages and review their procurement strategies. We also found that the coal burn forecast, although we know forecasting is difficult, hasn't materially improved compared to the previous audit period, and that obviously makes it hard to plan coal purchases. Number 4 is coal inventory management. We found coal inventory levels at Plant Daniel moved closer to targets. They had much higher levels previous months before the audit. We note that the company has undertaken, but they haven't yet completed, a review of target inventory levels for bituminous coal at the plant. And we recommend that the inventory level be set to be consistent with how the plant's been operating recently, so you don't build up inventories of high-cost bituminous coal. Number 5 is gas supply, gas transportation, and we found that Southern Company Services has a procurement strategy for gas that results in commodity costs that are consistent with market prices. The procurement of firm transportation and storage is consistent with their own approved procedures. And we also want to note that through Southern Company, MPC is participating in a gas hedging strategy, which in the audit period benefited customers. It saved customers quite a bit of money compared to the high prices, gas prices that we saw during the February storms. So we don't have any recommendations regarding the gas procurement or supply management. Number 6 is fleet operations. And what we've noticed is that on occasions, the plants are committed based on reliability as opposed to economics. And that can result in higher generation costs that are borne by Mississippi Power's customers. So we have a couple recommendations with respect to that. First of all, we recommend that the cost of uneconomic plant operations be included in planning processes, whether it be economic analysis of retirement, transmission planning, or other kinds of standalone services that are alternatives to operating these resources. And then with respect to a mechanism to share the cost of these commitment decisions, we think there should be considered a mechanism to figure out how to not have the MPC customers paying for all of that. But we do understand that this will be revisited following Gulf Power's exit from the pool in 2022. And then finally, in energy trading, they have a well-managed operation with good interaction between fleet operations, gas trading, and energy trading. But we also wanted to note that the way the system is set up, that your transmission topology, the pool has connections with other parts of the grid in the southeast, and there are opportunities. We tested a few months, December and June, where there could be opportunities for MPC to either sell power or buy power more broadly and either save money or earn money for their customers. So we think that that's a possibility that we'd like to see the company examine going forward. And that's the high-level 7 findings, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I move we approve on item 2, both the reports of Carr, Riggs, and Ingram and London Economics in relation to Mississippi Power and transmit them to the legislature.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, are you there?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So we got a motion, second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Now, Mr. Hammonds, I understand we're going to take items 3 through 6 together. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have a discussion and possible action regarding the proposed order in dockets number 2014 UN 132, 2017 UA 189, 2017 UN 198, and 2018 UN 258, Entergy Mississippi LLC orders granting intervention. Mr. Hammonds?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commission, before your 4 orders granting Rankin County, Mississippi, motion to intervene in the dockets the chairman mentioned, specifically those are Entergy's power management rider, unit power cost recovery rider, MISO rider, grid modernization rider, and restructuring credit rider. Entergy files resubmittals and redeterminations in November of every calendar year. The commission approved those factors at its January open meeting to go into effect with February 2022 bills. So those factors are in place right now, but before you are 4 orders granting Rankin County's motion to intervene in these dockets.
Okay, is there any questions?
No question, makes motion to adopt as presented.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Mr. Chairman, the counsel
Any
for,
opposed, ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, you can't see this, but the counsel for Entergy was seeking recognition to come to the mic for a minute.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Counsel for Entergy was seeking recognition to come to the mic for 1 minute and just a second before we go to the next item. She's at the mic now.
Thanks, Commissioner. Just
Yes.
very quickly, just for the record, on the fuel audit matters, we just wanted to clarify very quickly, and hopefully that will be helpful for the commission. We thank you so much for raising the concerns that you did, and so we just wanted to offer up on the capacity factor versus capability factor. We would be happy to continue reporting to the commission capacity factor. The only reason the plant can switch to capability factor is because INPO, the nuclear organization that we're a part of, switched to capability factor for all of the nuclear plants that are members of INPO, but to the extent the commission would like to receive reporting for both factors, we will continue to report on both of those. And so we just wanted to ease the commission's concern on that point. There are 2 months where capability factor was lower than capacity factor. So just, whatever reporting metrics the commission would like on that, we wanted to.
It's just bad optics. I mean, quite frankly, I don't care what INPO measures. That's an industry-related organization, not a regulatory organization. So that's not measuring the same thing. And I understand where you come from on that. We can have that discussion offline about it, but.
Of course. And then any information the commission would like about independence, we will provide. We really appreciate your input there. And so any other information you'd like, we'd be happy to provide. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Just
Okay.
before we,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, before we move off from the audit aspect there, what is the future of auditors going forward? Have we arrived at the end of the 2-year contract process?
Well, what happened in this instance is there was initially a 2-year contract with all of the firms that have been here today. And then the commission exercised its option to extend those contracts for 1 year last year with another option to renew for an additional year. So the next step would be for the commission to discuss internally and make the decision as to whether or not it wishes to exercise that option to extend with the current auditors or issue a separate request for production for a new slate of auditors going forward for the next audit periods.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to move on to number 7, discussion and possible action regarding the resolution concerning the appointment of Mississippians to the Tennessee Valley Authority Board of Directors. Commissioner Presley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This resolution is real simple. It's probably the least worded resolution we've ever had, so it doesn't take long to review it or read it. And this is, as of right now, there'll be 3 vacancies on the Tennessee Valley Authority Board of Directors that will come open in the month of May. There are 2 vacancies right now. And then former Tennessee House Speaker Beth Harwell, I think, has eliminated herself as being considered because of a race for Congress, which leaves 3 open seats on the 7-member board of the TVA. Now, I think I represent in the state probably 90% of the Tennessee Valley region, but I'm seeking support from other 2 commissioners on this because Mississippi has never had 2 seats on the board, although that we have the 2nd largest territory in the TVA of the other member states. Definitely, we should have representation, and hoping that we can call in this resolution upon the president to appoint 2 Mississippians to these seats. That would be equitable, that would be fair, and would be representative of a state that has been underrepresented for a long time on this board. There was a period since I've been on the commission that there was not anybody from Mississippi on that board. And so I've spoken with members of our congressional delegation, others. Hopefully we also copy them on a copy of this resolution and send it. Mr. James, who works with me, has spoken with the executive office in the White House about getting this on record, where we're simply just saying we don't care who it is. We do care who it is, but we hope, I mean, it's got to be a good qualified individual, but that the president should reserve 2 spots on the TVA board in the open appointments for Mississippians to be appointed. And so that's my motion to approve the resolution.
All right, I'll second that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Can we have a discussion?
Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. So,
Okay, go ahead.
so while I'm not disagreeing with the intent and spirit of what we're looking at here and what we're pursuing, I certainly understand we want to have adequate, reasonable, experienced, representatives of the state of Mississippi,
We just won't have Mississippi.
or Mississippians, represented on this. My concern is what does this begin to take us down the road? I know for economic development purpose, for growth, for representation, have our voices heard. But if we begin to demand, and it all gets back, for me, what is our role with TVA?
Well, we're
What
elected.
is our role? How do we, our regulatory authority and oversight in the recommendations we have here and what this may say? What prevents us down the road from then encouraging and making recommendations to even our investor-owned utilities, Southern Company, Entergy Corporation, Atmos, CenterPoint, to demand or recommend or make a statement regarding the makeup of their board going forward for an entity that we have virtually little regulatory interaction with? I'm just concerned that the precedent this may set going forward and the creep of our mission and statements made publicly. I'm certainly capable of and supportive of getting that on board, and I'm certainly capable of writing letters from office and making those contacts as well. I'm concerned the messaging this put forward in the commission's voice and aspirations in certain areas of leadership oversight.
Well, I mean, the counterpoint to your point is, we go to NARUC meetings and you voted on resolutions in committees at NARUC that make public statements. I have. Everybody that goes up there does. TVA, as you well know, is a public power entity, not like Entergy or Mississippi Power. It's owned by the taxpayers. It's in federal statute as to the number of seats that are there. It's left up to a decision by those in the White House, and that seems to flip every 4 to 8 years, obviously, to be different appointees on the board. And I just don't share the view that it'd be better to have 2-3 people from Alabama and 4 from Tennessee sitting on a board in which Mississippi has the second largest territory. Now, I know you don't have a lot of these TVA customers in your district. I do,
Right.
but you don't have many as I got. And we deal constantly with them on things in which I can see on a day-to-day basis that our voice is not being heard on several things. And so it doesn't take a lot to convince me to say that Mississippi ought to have a seat at the table rather than some other type of argument that, to me, doesn't hold water when we vote on resolutions at NARUC. We vote on resolutions here. You brought one to us on Energy Efficiency Week.
Certainly.
I mean, that could be creep. We could use that. I'm trying to come up with a way to say for our state that we have the ability to have our voices heard. Now, if you want to be against Mississippi on the board, then vote against the resolution. That's your right. But that's not what I'm trying to do, and I'm not trying to do anything except say we've been underrepresented. We've never had 2 seats on that board. We don't have anybody sitting on that board today. We've got an issue in my district related to medical marijuana where they refuse to serve or are giving our co-ops trouble related to refuse to serve on medical marijuana. And every other issue that I could go through a litany of problems, including on March 27th, and I hope the TVA people are listening. On March 27th, we had a meeting set up about regulatory issues that we shared jurisdiction on quality of service, and the meeting got canceled. So you haven't had to put up with, Commissioner Bailey, what I've had to put up with, and you don't represent the number of people in TVA that I represent, and I don't have a problem in the world saying that we should have adequate representation. I don't think we ought to let Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama have seats that Mississippi deserves.
I certainly do not have that problem, and I'm quite capable of relaying that to our congressional delegation through our office through the proper
what's the difference
channels.
in a
And I'm gonna
letter
go
and a
there. What I'm
resolution?
asking, is there also coordination with the governor's office on this, local economic development agencies, the energy cooperatives in Mississippi, others that have multiple voice to further reinforce
Well, we're
the
elected.
importance of this going forward?
We're elected by the people.
I
It
understand.
gives us a right to talk.
I understand that.
I move we approve the resolution, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion passed. If there's nothing else there, we will adjourn this meeting, if there's nothing else before the commission. Thank you all for sharing, this meeting with us, and thank you for giving us the time to, get this thing done, and, I appreciate the staff